Hi, listeners and fellow adventurers. This is Living in the Sprawl's lovely and talented fiance/producer, Lisa Lowe, here to tell you about every table. My days typically start at 4 a.m. to exercise, work a full day, cook, clean, and work on this podcast, all while trying to get to bed by 9 p.m. Like many of you, there aren't always enough hours in the day to do it all, so I do rely on food delivery that requires little to no prep, is healthy, cost-effective, and most importantly, delicious. Every table is offering our listeners 2 free meals and free delivery when you use the code SPRAWL, SPRAWL, on your first subscription order. I will put the link in the show notes and on our website at livinginthesprawlpodcast.com. And now, your humble correspondent and this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. My name is Jon Steinberg, your humble correspondent and host, sitting alongside my lovely and talented producer/fiance, Lisa Lowe, and we have a special episode to bring all of you. You know how in life, sometimes you find yourself on something of a kick. You want to read all the Harry Potter books in a summer. You want to hit up all of the California-based national parks before the year is out. You want to read all of the Dickens novels in under 2 years. Well, my fiance and I have found ourselves on a kick regarding the Spanish missions in California. Now, we are determined to see all 21 of them, but for purposes of this podcast, we shall regale you with our stories from the Southern California-based properties. Now, I don't want to get too deep into politics, the way in which Native Americans were treated by the Spanish missionaries. We can reserve discussions about topics such as that for another show. I simply want to highlight the history of the mission project writ large and how these historical outposts still serve as a way to truly understand California's past more than 250 years later. Was it a good idea to have Spanish missions in California? That's not for me to say. Lord knows I do have my own opinions, but again, we are saving those for another time. So, hot off recent visits to 6 different missions, we've come up with our list. So here we go with the 10 California missions from inspirational to not so great. Number 10, Mission Soledad. Mission Soledad was founded in 1791, making it the 13th of the 21 California missions. So this is maybe an hour and a half north of Paso Robles. It's right before you get to Salinas. So some may contend that it's not even part of our geographic scope, but I beg to differ. It is still kind of central California, which is still underneath our purview. But Soledad, well, it's really the right choice of words for the mission. Soledad, which of course means solitude, is exemplified by the kind of bare bones structure that sits where I imagine a once thriving mission community once sat. If you visit the Soledad mission today, I would say your trip will last a good 7 minutes. You will walk out of your vehicle, have family members stand with the mission in the background. You will snap a shot, and then you will say, let's head on back in the vehicle and get out of here. I don't know if the prospects of the Soledad mission have any opportunity, frankly, to get better and to attract more tourists who aren't just missions fanatics like my fiance and I are. But from all of the missions that we've had opportunity to observe, without a doubt, the Soledad mission is the least impressive. I hate saying negative things about historical artifacts and places and buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places. However, I'm going to make an exception when it comes to talking about number 10, Mission Soledad. For number 9, we head down to Little Denmark, a community covered in a previous installment of Living in the Sprawl, and that is Solvang, where we journeyed to Mission Santa Ynez, established in 1804, and this was the 19th mission in the Spanish missions in California system. So what I found fascinating about not only this mission, but a couple others, Lompoc and Santa Barbara, and we'll touch upon more of this later, but all was not well with the Chumash people who had lived and thrived in these areas for thousands of years before the entrance of Europeans. And actually, this mission was heavily burnt and desecrated during the Chumash revolt against the Spanish missionaries in 1824. If you go there today, you will see if you go there on a Sunday in particular, you will be witness to a wonderful chorus of Christian singers and churchgoers who clearly make this a weekend ritual. Now, the fact that the town of Solvang has really blossomed up and around the mission tends to maybe offer more tourism to the mission for people who can't get in to a Danish restaurant with an hour and a half wait. It's like, we have an hour to kill. We have kids to entertain. Let's take them to one of the missions. They had to learn about the missions in 4th grade, and so now they can see one for themselves. It is fairly well preserved despite what happened in 1824. And if you do visit today, it's one of the best kept missions in the entire system. Typically, these missions were established near areas of trade, i.e., close to the water, or a short driving distance from a large population center. And yet, here at Mission Santa Ynez, there's only a minimal amount of that going down. And if I were a member of the Chumash Indian tribe, I would think, okay, first we're starting in Santa Barbara, then Lompoc, then Ventura. You would see the writing on the wall. They're coming for our land completely. And this and many other things led to that revolt that I'll talk about a little bit more when we discuss a different mission. But suffice to say, amid the charming terrain of Solvang, you have one of the 21 California missions right smack in the middle of a mega hotbed for tourism. So, at number 9, Santa Ynez. At number 8, Mission San Miguel. Built in 1797, this was the 16th mission out of the 21 Spanish missions in California. This one is a little bit off the beaten path, kind of in that no man's land between Paso Robles and the Salinas Valley in Monterey County. They do offer a pretty great tour where you are led inside to check out the chapel and led around the grounds to survey the scene as it might have appeared during the reign of the Great Mission. But I found San Miguel as an enormously captivating mission for a different reason. In 1848, a man named William Reed and his family were staying at the mission, and Reed had been bragging to townsfolk about being able to have located gold. This, of course, was 1848. We know what happened around then. And it was shortly after word got around regarding Reed's admission of securing gold that a group of bandits also heard about the discovery and came to the mission one night in search of said gold. While they didn't find what they were looking for, they did manage to take the lives of the entire Reed family. I can't believe that in my preparation for this episode, this was the first time I'd ever heard about this story, and yet there it is, Murder at the Mission. It's got a Netflix documentary written all over it. Today, however, the San Miguel Mission does boast a wonderful gift shop where you can purchase books that attest to the glorious past of the property, and you probably won't find any literature that talks about what happened to William Reed and his family. And ghosts are said to monitor the property. So for those of you inclined toward the paranormal and the macabre, you might want to check out Mission San Miguel. At number 7, Mission San Fernando. This episode is being recorded maybe 10 miles away from this mission. It is located adjacent to a high school where my fiancée got her education, and is also the resting home of noted comedian Bob Hope. In terms of overall beauty, the San Fernando Mission leaves a little bit to be desired. In a tour, you do have the ability to see some of the stately rooms where you'd imagine friars and pastors and heads of the church would hold as their living spaces. If I'm ranking all of the California missions that I've seen, San Fernando is fine. It's about what you would expect from a historical mission that attempts to grapple with the past as this great state of ours really came into focus. For a long time, who knew what California was ultimately going to be? The Spanish missionaries envisioned a New Spain. They even called it that, New Spain, as just being an offshoot of what they had practiced over in Europe as Spanish residents. And they came to California with the express purpose of Christianizing the Native Americans and developing a series of religious outposts that were meant to foster a lifelong relationship between subject and theology. So the San Fernando Mission exists. It's decently preserved. You can go on a middle-of-the-road tour there and see the gravesite where Bob Hope is buried, but it's not worthy of a top 5 submission on this list. And you could do a visit to the San Fernando Mission in like 10 minutes and feel as though you had all your bases covered. Coming in at number 6, Mission La Purísima in the beautiful city of Lompoc. The mission was founded in 1787, and it was the 11th mission to be consecrated as part of the Spanish missions in California. So we recently had an opportunity to tour the grounds at this mission, and much to the surprise of my fiance and I, it might be the best example of a mission as it once was. You have the ability to freely roam the grounds, venturing from room to room and different area to different area, seeing the whole scope of how a civilization was based out of this location. You can see the multiple kitchens where food was prepared, sleeping areas, rooms where animal hides were skinned and used as wool. And this goes along with the quintessential, hey, look, there are those two church bells, and wow, they're beautiful, and when they clank, it's a work of majesty. And there were even a whole host of animals who were seemingly enjoying a nice Sunday afternoon on the property. Ordinarily, when you pay the $10 to check out the mission, you are led by a tour guide who kind of quickly ushers you in from room to room, with the emphasis being placed on the chapel. And the chapel is meant to do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as a tour of a mission is concerned. But for this one, Mission La Purísima, it was the fact that it was so wild and so open that made it magical for the two of us, because we were able to fully envision what life was like for residents of the area when it was at its zenith. And then I thought about the aforementioned, I brought it up during the Santa Ynez discussion a little while ago, the Chumash Revolt of 1824, where a large-scale initiative to take back the missions from those who served within them was undertaken. And it definitely got bloody. Individuals lost their lives. And it is not a part of the Spanish mission history that I was ever taught about in school. But there was a full-scale revolt from the Chumash people, with ground zero being La Purísima. This had come in the wake of ill treatment and onerous building obligations. But moreover, Chumash Indians were completely tired of being viewed as second-class citizens. They'd had enough. This was their land. These gentlemen from Spain had no history with the land, no historical connection to it, and they felt like they needed to get rid of them. Now, ultimately, that's not what wound up happening. They were outnumbered, and the European missionaries were in possession of weapons that could keep such revolts at bay. But the revolt is noteworthy for how well it was planned, put into action, and a certifiable example of Native Americans abjectly saying no to colonization. So here we have the complicated history of the mission system writ large, and it came to a head in 1824 at Mission La Purísima. Coming in at number 5, we head up the coast to one of the most gorgeous areas in the entire state, where we set up shop to investigate our number 5 mission. And that, of course, is Mission Santa Barbara. Established in 1786 which made it the 10th mission in the series of Spanish missions set up inside California. Teddy Roosevelt had an opportunity to visit here, and he was not the only guest of note. Other presidents, Ronald Reagan, they also had a chance to visit the famed mission. This is definitely one of the more picturesque missions of the 21. Santa Barbara as a whole, of course, is known for its widespread natural beauty. And when it comes to the mission representing the region, the same holds true. A beautiful set of bells bring parishioners to service and let residents know that it is, in fact, time for dinner. Father Sarah, this was one of the 6 missions that he himself had a hand in establishing, and it's noteworthy for its sheer beauty. There have been a couple of macabre ghost stories, what with a woman appearing late at night, upset about her treatment during an experience at the mission. And this kind of goes for most of the missions in general. A lot of them are synonymous with, well, let's say extracurricular activities. But if you are looking for a quintessential, breathtaking mission perched high above the hills in Santa Barbara, this is the one where you should probably take your family. And now we turn our attention to Mission San Gabriel, built in 1774, and it being the 4th mission out of the 21 constructed in California. This mission has an absolutely breathtaking chapel. It is utilized by local community members on a weekly basis, and when you've seen some of the chapels at other missions, not naming any names, maybe Soledad, you will definitely notice the difference with the one at San Gabriel. There's also a tremendous gift shop that's there, and a self-guided tour will provide you with all of the historical information that you seek. And it's at this point that I want to briefly address the fact that most of the California missions have, over the course of history, dealt with some natural disaster out of their control, be it an earthquake, a fire, a mudslide. Any number of obstacles have really stood in the way of a number of these missions, to the point where, for a lot of them, they had to be rebuilt, sometimes more than once. And if they're in this great state, that means any day a grade 5 earthquake could hit and ruin everything, basically. So there was extensive damage done to both the San Fernando mission and the San Gabriel mission in the wake of the 1994 Northridge earthquake. And earthquakes have been a consistent presence in the state of California for the past 200 years, so that when you visit a place such as Mission San Gabriel, appreciate it while it's there. Appreciate it before, some yahoo decides that he wants to set a fire to the building's roof and nearly burn the place down, which is what happened recently. Yeah, these missions are all on the National Register of Historic Places, and they do offer us a key to the past of this great state. more earthquakes will come, more fires will come, vandals, arsonists, it's all in play. So I advise check out these unbelievable cultural landmarks while you can. And San Gabriel is one of the best ones to check out. The staff are entirely welcoming. I went by myself. I was ushered into the chapel, which I found stunning, beyond belief, actually. And I was so thankful that despite earthquakes and fires and Lord knows how many examples of things that could have prevented the mission from continuing on, that it is still there, it is still thriving, and it does mark a pivotal point in the history of our beautiful state. And now we turn our attention to Mission San Gabriel, built in 1774, and it being the fourth mission out of the 21 constructed in California. This mission has an absolutely breathtaking chapel. It is utilized by local community members on a weekly basis, and when you've seen some of the chapels at other missions, not naming any names, maybe Soledad, you will definitely notice the difference with the one at San Gabriel. There's also a tremendous gift shop that's there, and a self-guided tour will provide you with all of the historical information that you seek. And it's at this point that I want to briefly address the fact that most of the California missions have, over the course of history, dealt with some natural disaster out of their control, be it an earthquake, a fire, a mudslide. Any number of obstacles have really stood in the way of a number of these missions, to the point where for a lot of them, they had to be rebuilt, sometimes more than once. And if they're in this great state, that means any day a grade 5 earthquake could hit and ruin everything, basically. So there was extensive damage done to both the San Fernando mission and the San Gabriel mission in the wake of the 1994 Northridge earthquake. And earthquakes have been a consistent presence in the state of California for the past 200 years, so that when you visit a place such as Mission San Gabriel, appreciate it while it's there. Appreciate it before, some yahoo decides that he wants to set a fire to the building's roof and nearly burn the place down, which is what happened recently. Yeah, these missions are all on the National Register of Historic Places, and they do offer us a key to the past of this great state. More earthquakes will come, more fires will come, vandals, arsonists, it's all in play. So I advise check out these unbelievable cultural landmarks while you can. And San Gabriel is one of the best ones to check out. The staff are entirely welcoming. I went by myself. I was ushered into the chapel, which I found stunning, beyond belief, actually. And I was so thankful that despite earthquakes and fires and Lord knows how many examples of things that could have prevented the mission from continuing on, that it is still there, it is still thriving, and it does mark a pivotal point in the history of our beautiful state. Number 2 on Living in the Sprawls list of 10 missions that inspire and some of the ones that don't takes us to San Diego. Mission San Diego de Alcalá. Established in 1769, and this, of course, is where it all started. It's got the Father Sarah statue out front to prove it, and will forever be known as the first of the 21 missions. Now, things did not get off to what I would characterize as a great start. Actually, in 1775, so only 6 years after the mission had been founded, a local group of angry natives stormed the mission and killed the pastor of record, who is now buried at the cemetery on the grounds at Mission San Diego. And this was just one. I talked about the Chumash revolt, and this was another in a litany of examples of local natives not necessarily loving the idea of having foreign Spanish-speaking priests telling them how to live, how to pray, and every other possible life decision that they should be making. A beautiful building in a pretty nice part of San Diego. This is certainly a stop that anyone traveling through the area should make in honor of its historical ramifications. After all, the missions really did sort of set the tone for what California was to become as a state. If you think about it, look at where all the missions are located. San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Santa Clara, San Jose. All population centers grew around the missions. And it was at this mission where Father Sarah actually started growing wine. It was the first vineyard officially to begin production out of all the 21 missions. Now, unfortunately, it was not all that successful, and the wine production didn't last all that long, but they did try, and there are merits in simply trying something. San Diego boasts a great deal. It's microbreweries, beautiful beaches, interesting professional sports teams, and it has the distinct privilege of being the location where the first of California's 21 missions was founded. And at last, we reach the final spot on Living in the Sprawls list of 10 greatest missions and the ones that aren't so great. So for number 1, my co-host, producer, lover, and just overall amazing human being, Lisa and I are in full agreement. Mission San Juan Capistrano. The mission was constructed in the year of our Lord 1776, and it is the 6th mission out of the 21 that grace our fair state. So from a beauty standpoint, I think this one stands head and shoulders above all the others, maybe with the possible exception of Santa Barbara, but still, from its gorgeous entranceways through the sort of hillside that it kind of clings to, the nexus between natural beauty and human developed architectural prowess is truly on display when taking into account the San Juan Capistrano mission. As with so many of the missions that we've highlighted on this list, San Juan Capistrano has dealt with its fair share of obstacles, earthquakes, fires, and the devastating loss of a domed shrine building that was said to be one of the magnificent sights of the West until it did succumb to damage from an earthquake. But in terms of being fully preserved, you can't do much better than the mission at San Juan Capistrano. Exhibits are located throughout the grounds telling you about life during the mission period, and you can see for yourself how a day might have gone during that period of time. With some of the missions, like Soledad, for example, you can tell that maybe some money has gone into it from like a larger charitable donation, but I don't know how many people truly care about the day-to-day upkeep at such a place. But with San Juan Capistrano, there are clearly legions of devoted fans who make it their personal business to keep that place looking as spectacular as possible on a yearly basis. I would really call it the crown jewel of the Southern California-based missions. Now, I haven't seen all of the ones in Northern California. I've heard great things about Carmel, San Francisco. I've heard great things about a number of them. But having visited all of the ones in Southern California, this was where I landed as the best, most comprehensive example of the California mission period. So if you ever wanted to take your children on a spontaneous field trip to a place that they might actually care about if you sold it to them the right way, I'd highly recommend Mission San Juan Capistrano. And with that, we are going to have to sign off for another episode of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. A couple of the social media announcements. You can reach out to us on our Instagram handle, which is Living in the Sprawl Podcast. The email address is livinginthesprawlpodcast@gmail.com, and we invite you to send us all your questions, queries, observations, suggestions for potential episode topics. We want to correspond with you guys, truly. You can find us on all of the major platforms where podcasts are found. We would appreciate a 5-star rating on Apple. A nice comment would also be useful. For some reason, those comments and the ratings, they hold a disproportionate weight in terms of how successful a podcast happens to be. And until next time, we hope you are all having some continued adventures out there in the great wide world. On behalf of my beautiful, lovely, and talented producer, Lisa Lowe, I am your humble correspondent and host. My name is Jon Steinberg. Thanking you again for listening to Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast.